Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah Birch and I do a few things here on this channel, but lately I've been focusing on true crime stories and sharing some stories that you've maybe never heard before. So today's case is an absolutely crazy one. It's relatively new. I believe it happened in December of 2020. So it's a relatively recent case. Honestly, I don't think it got as much media attention as I would have thought because I was still very much into true crime in 2020 and I don't remember hearing much about this case until a little bit later on when some of the YouTube channels I follow and podcasts I follow covered it. But regardless, if you haven't heard the story before, you're in for a wild ride. With all that being said, this case is really going to take you on a ethical, moral journey. It's going to pose potentially a bit of a dilemma for you, especially if you are a woman. As a woman, we all know what it feels like to be violated in some way or objectified in some way. There's many experiences that we've all had as girls, whether it be just the mundane day-to-day stuff or something a little more serious of feeling violated. But the crux of this dilemma that we're going to discuss today is how violated does one need to feel in order to validate or justify violence or retaliation, especially when this retaliation is in the form of murder. Because this case exists a little bit more in the gray instead of the black and white, I am curious to hear what you guys are going to think. Some people view Jade Janks, who is the main person that I'll be speaking about today, some people view Jade as a martyr, a victim, and think what she did was in some way honestly kind of noble and warranted. And other people simply view Jade Janks as a cold-blooded killer. At the time of this case, it's December 2020, and 37-year-old Jade Janks is truly in the prime of her life, in the prime of her career. We probably all remember this time, including me, as being particularly awful because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but honestly, Jade seemed to be doing quite well. She was living in a place called Solano Beach, California, which is just about 20 miles north of San Diego, and she had her own interior design business. She had an Instagram page called Jade Janks Interior, which I believe was quite popular, and through the Instagram page, which kind of showcased not only her interior design talents, but also her lifestyle, her beauty, and then just the fact that she was in a pretty rich, wealthy neighborhood in Solano Beach, Jade was raking in the money. Jade was doing really well for herself career-wise and financially. As a young girl, Jade was described as popular, likable, sociable, and she was a part of various different clubs. At the age of 14, Jade was introduced to her future stepdad, a man named Tom Merriman, who will also come back in this case, and he is the victim in this case. And right off the bat, Tom and Jade were thick as thieves. They were very close, they were very bonded, and she started calling him dad, he started calling her his daughter, and honestly, the two went off without a hitch. Normally, there's a bit of animosity or tension within a new family dynamic when there's step-parents introduced, especially when the child is in their teens. That's just a difficult situation all around, but honestly, it couldn't have gone any better for Tom and Jade. However, unfortunately, Tom and his wife, who was Jade's mom, I don't know her name, but Tom and his wife did divorce, so he was then at that point removed out of Jade's life when Jade was in her early 20s, but the two honestly remained close. Jade would always see him as her stepdad, whether or not he was still married to her mom. As Jade reflected on her childhood, she did have her own unique relationship with her dad, but she did feel like Tom had a greater effect on her and influence on her as a person and how she grew up and how she viewed the world than her own biological father. So that just goes to show you how close these two really were. As Jade got older and started to think about education and career, she decided she really wanted to lean into her more creative side, and she started developing a true passion for interior design. She studied at San Diego Mesa College and Mira Costa College, and then got a few jobs at various interior design studios to build up her experience and portfolio. And before long, she decided to take the leap and go out on her own in 2018 to start her own company, which was Jade Janks Interior. As I briefly mentioned earlier, Jade's demographic within her company quickly became the rich, upper-class, wealthy families in the Solano Beach and San Diego neighborhoods. There was no shortage of large, empty mansions sprawling around that Jade could get her creative juices flowing and turn this empty house into an interior design masterpiece. So Jade also was described as like bubbly and friendly and sociable and beautiful and very likable, very approachable. So Jade had no issue becoming quickly successful with this company because she had the personality for it, and she also had this built-in demographic that would have no issue spending money on interior design. I mean, your average kind of person, like in the city I live in, there's not a ton of people who would blow a lot of money on interior designs. It's just like not something you have the budget for. But in a place like Solano Beach or San Diego, there probably are a lot of people who have that extra $100,000 or whatever it is to set aside to hire an interior designer. I just made that number up out of nowhere. I have no idea how expensive it is to hire an interior designer, but I do believe Jade was a millionaire, so the girl was charging big money. As the years went on, Jade did stay in contact with her stepfather, Tom Merriman. She said that she wanted to keep him in her life in some capacity because she felt like he was one of the people who she could truly trust. And she was always just so grateful at how great he was to her, how safe he made her feel. And that is very important to keep in mind as we progress through this case. So at this point, Tom is about 64 years old and honestly not doing very well. He was struggling for many, many years with substance abuse issues and had many illnesses. I'm assuming some of those are related to his substance abuse, but they could also be unrelated. But he had all of these medical issues and more. I'm going to read out a few to you now. Liver dysfunction, pacemaker, an enlarged heart, congenital heart disease, congested lungs, and more. So Tom had no wife, no kids, no siblings. Tom was very much a loner at this point in his life. And as he was getting older and his health was getting worse, Jade felt more and more compelled to be a part of his life and to be there for him and help him in the way that she felt he once helped her when she was growing up. So Tom actually ended up moving in the exact same neighborhood as Jade and like literally lived just a few doors down. And this made it easy for the two of them to kind of rekindle their friendship and their connection. And Jade would go over there like every night and cook dinner for Tom or tidy up for Tom, check in on Tom. She was like his lifeline. This man literally had nobody else except for Jade, and Jade went above and beyond to make sure Tom was doing okay. As the COVID pandemic, went on and on throughout 2020 and they were nearing into December, and Tom was definitely feeling the effects of this mentally, physically. Tom was not doing well, and this had Jade very concerned. And everything kind of came to a head on December 15th, 2020, when Jade received a call that Tom needed to be taken to the hospital because he had fallen over and hurt himself. So Jade rushed over there, put Tom in her car, and drove him to the hospital. She realized at this point that the reason he fell was because he was very intoxicated and that he had relapsed at this point, so she decided to check him in for 2 weeks at a rehabilitation center. So after he was discharged from the hospital because of hurting himself falling, she then drove him to the rehabilitation center and checked him in there. While he was away, Jade reassured him that she would take care of his place, she would tidy up, she'd check the mail, and she also said she would cook some meals and keep them in the freezer so we had lots of meals ready when he came home. She was just truly going above and beyond to make sure that this transition for him into sobriety was the easiest one possible. So a few days later, about 6 days later, on December 21st, 2020, Jade went over there as she said she would, and she's just pottering around, tidying up, cleaning some things up. And then she goes into Tom's sort of office area and notices that his desk with his computers is just an absolute mess. So she's shuffling around, moving papers, organizing things, and she accidentally clicks the top of the mouse. And when the monitor came to life, she was absolutely shocked and honestly quite grossed out to see that there was a photo of women's breasts as his screensaver. So it was just a photo of a pair of breasts on a woman right there out in the open, staring her in the face. I'm just trying to put myself in Jade's headspace, but from what I read in reports, her initial instinct was just to kind of be grossed out, ew, my stepdad's a freak, ooh. But I feel also, I hate to say this, you guys know what a raging feminist I am. Well, maybe you don't, but I am one. But I feel like you would just be a little bit oh, ew, that's gross, but he's a lonely old man. Who cares if he found a little porn on the internet? I don't know, you know what I mean? It may not seem like the biggest deal at first, but it became a big deal when Jade took a closer look and noticed a birthmark on one of the boobs, and that birthmark matched her boobs exactly. I feel like you already kind of would recognize your boobs. Like, I think I would recognize my own boobs. I don't know, guys. Let me know in the comments if you would recognize your own boobs in a photo. It's like you take a photo of your own boobs and then you go and look at it. It's like, of course, you're expecting to see your boobs. But if you're just walking past, like, a random photo and you're not expecting anything and then you see a pair of boobs, I feel like it would take a few seconds for it to click. And that's what happened to Jade. But when it clicked, and she realized what this photo was, she was absolutely sickened, disgusted, and horrified. So she kind of like composes herself for a second and she decides she needs to dig a little deeper into this and figure out what the heck is going on. So she sits down, she gets into the computer, and she starts going through all of the different photos, folders, files, trying to figure out what is going on here. And lo and behold, she stumbles upon hundreds of photos of herself organized into different named folders. Photos of her performing sexual acts, photos of her in the shower, photos of her breasts, photos of her genitalia, any sort of violating photo you can imagine. He had those organized into different folders. So, for example, he had a photo called Jade Shower, and then he had a folder called Jade Snatch, which that just sent shivers through my entire body. But if you don't know, maybe if you're younger, the word snatch is like a very vulgar, kind of gross, old school way to refer to a woman's vagina. So yeah, we hate to see this. We hate to see this. So all of these like beautiful memories and feelings that she had about her stepdad, about their bond and their relationship and their friendship and their trust and their respect for each other, all of this is just crumbling before her very eyes. And she's realizing what Tom really is, and that's a creep and a predator. So I'm sure what you're wondering right now is, how did he even get these photos? And that is a good question. I will do my best to explain this to you. Although honestly, even through my research, I still don't. There is no like concrete answer, because Tom would be the only one who could explain this, and Tom is dead. But from what Jade gathered, most of the photos, a lot of the photos anyway, were photos she took herself or a boyfriend took of her. So she would take some selfies, some nudes, not a big deal. Many, many people have done it, to send to boyfriends in the past, like ex-boyfriends, or maybe just even for herself, because, there's nothing wrong with taking a little cheeky photo of yourself if you want. And then photos that boyfriends had taken of her when they were together. So like, let's say photos of her lying on the bed, or photos of her coming out of the shower, like just photos that are like fun and sexy that you would take with your partner. So she had kept a lot of these photos herself on an SD card, and she'd like stored it with her laptop in like a laptop bag, I think. And then from there, she just like would know where they were at all times. They were on this SD card. So that laptop and that SD card had gone missing at some point in time, and Jade was never able to find them. So she's putting two and two together in her head, like, okay, some of these photos I remember taking, and I remember putting them on the SD card, which is now stolen. So Tom must have stolen it out of my house one of the many times I invited him over for whatever reason, and gone through the SD card, probably looking for this exact thing. Probably looking for anything to do with Jade that he could get off on. Let's be honest. This man clearly had an unhealthy obsession with Jade. She also thought that maybe he had hacked into her iCloud account, because as you guys know, any photos like you take on an iPhone will be stored on the iCloud or the cloud. And God forbid someone breaks into the cloud, they can access like any photos that you've ever taken on your phone, basically. And so she thinks that was what he was maybe doing as well, and just like downloading photos onto his computer as he went over the course of the weeks, months, years. Because these photos truly spanned at least like 15 years. Some of them were from when she was a teenager, like under the age of 18, which would technically be considered child porn. I don't think I'm allowed to say the word on YouTube, which is dumb, but yeah. So she also was looking at some of the photos and wondering if maybe Tom had set up cameras inside of her room or inside of her bathroom when she was a teenager and in her early 20s, because they were all living in the same family home at this time, her and her brother and her mom and her stepdad, Tom. So some of these photos she didn't remember taking herself, and she looked very young. So she's thinking maybe he set up hidden cameras while he was living with me, which I wish I could say that surprises me. I wish I could say that's the very first time I've ever heard of that happening, but it's truly not. I've heard so many stories through true crime TikTok, just whatever, of young girls who are under the age of 18. I mean, it doesn't matter how old you are, but in this particular scenario, young girls living with like their stepdad or their mom's boyfriend, and that man sets up cameras in the daughter's room or in the bathroom because he's a freak of nature. So this is something that's actually quite common and that you see a lot in these type of cases where a stepdad moves in with his new wife or his girlfriend and he's living with a young girl who's like in her teenage years. And so he starts preying on her. Oh, it's giving me the creepy crawlies just talking about it. But I wouldn't be surprised. I haven't seen that confirmed anywhere that 100% happened, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happened. But either way, as I've explained, there was many different ways that Tom could have gotten these photos, and the only person who can truly explain the process was Tom, and he's dead. So either way, it doesn't really matter how he got the photos. What matters is he had the photos, he kept the photos, he organized the photos, and he clearly liked to sit in his gross little desk chair and look at the photos, and I'm sure you can put two and two together as to what Tom was doing. And all of these images are probably floating through her head right now. I feel so bad for Jade in this moment. I feel like her whole sense of reality and safety and security would come crumbling down on her. And she said through this traumatic experience of discovering the photos, it started to maybe unlock some other memories in her head. So she started going back and remembering things a little differently and recounting things in a more sinister light, like, oh, when he did that, was that actually really inappropriate? Or when he used to touch me in this way, was that like a friendly pat on the back, or was it more? Like, she started seeing everything through a very darkened lens, because how can you not? Now she realizes that this man was lusting after her the entire time, objectifying her sexually the entire time, and manipulating her for her friendship, for her attention, for her presence in his life. So in the days between finding the photos and picking up Tom from the rehab, Jade was truly spiraling, as you can imagine. Jade felt so unsafe, so disgusted in her own skin, like she wanted to crawl out of her own skin. She said she couldn't look at herself in the mirror. She didn't want to be naked. She didn't want to change. She didn't want to shower because she didn't want to be naked. She didn't want to see her naked body or feel her own naked body. She also began sleeping with a knife under her pillow. And a lot of this was because she was now seeing Tom as a predator and potentially dangerous. What if he found out that she found out about the photos? Would he just let that slide, or would he come after her and try to silence her in case she goes to the police? Either way, it's clear in this time period that all of this is taking a toll on Jade, and she's really acting out of character and starting to feel the need to go to some extreme measures. So with that being said, you can really see this starting when on the day that she actually found the photos, I don't know how she found this man, but she contacted a guy through Facebook whose name is Alan Roach, and he was known to be a fixer. That was his little tagline. And he said he could fix whatever problems you have, and he described himself as a private security person. So I'm sure you can put two and two together here. It kind of seems like he was a mercenary type. I mean, I know that word's like a little bold to describe Alan Roach, but whatever it may be, he could do it for you. And there are people out there who this is what they do for work, but they just have to be very sly and very strategic about how they go about promoting this, if that makes sense. So anyway, Jade reached out to him and basically said, I'm in need of help. I'm in need of security. And he said, whatever problem you have, don't worry, I can fix it. So he came over to visit Jade later that day, and Jade explained the whole story to him about the photos, how unsafe she felt, how maybe she was worried that there was cameras set up in her home right now, or when she was a child there was cameras there. So he gave her a full-scale security system and set that up for her. And he also advised her to sleep with a weapon under her bed. So that's when she started sleeping with the knife under her bed, and just gave her some basic safety tips or just things to keep in mind moving forward so that she could find a little bit of peace of mind. However, this is not where Alan's story ends, and we will get to that a little bit later on. One thing that was a little weird about this whole interaction was that Jade asked Alan to sit outside of the washroom and just stand there like a bodyguard while she showered, because she said she felt too scared to shower on her own. and she just couldn't get naked. She couldn't get in the shower, knowing that he could walk in at any moment. So Alan was like, okay. So Alan kind of took it upon himself to be her like private bodyguard and stand outside of the bathroom while she would shower. And this became a reoccurring thing. Almost every single day, Jade would ask Alan to come over and stand outside of the bathroom while she showered, and Alan would do it. So like day after day after day, this became like their little thing. And it is rumored, I can't confirm this, but it is rumored that the two of them developed a little bit of a relationship or like some sort of bond, friendship, connection in some way. I mean, I wouldn't be inviting just like any old stranger to come over every single day to stand outside my shower. Like at that point, you do feel somewhat safe and intimate with this person. And they would text all the time. Apparently in the like week and a bit between her discovering the photos and the murder, they texted hundreds of times, and they would call each other on the phone. And as I've said, there was clearly some sort of friendship or relationship forming between these two. And a lot of the text messages between the two were strategically written in a way that would be kind of mysterious and cryptic and vague. And what they were discussing was some sort of plan. Given the situation, given the circumstances, I'm sure you can imagine what the plan is, especially considering that Alan is a fixer. So now we're going to jump ahead a little bit to December 31st, 2020, and this was the day that Alan was set to be released from rehab, and because he had nobody else, Jade was the one who was called to go pick him up. So Jade drove to the rehab, picked up Alan, and then drove back. Jade, I'm sure, was a little bit nervous about this, but by all accounts, it seemed like Tom had no idea that anything was wrong or that Jade had made this catastrophic discovery. When they were pulling into the neighborhood, one of their neighbors, Ramona and George Hamilton, who was a couple, they noticed that Tom was kind of slumped over in the passenger seat and seemed really out of it. Like he seemed completely drugged or sleepy or sick or something. He just did not seem right. But, it's not really their business and they didn't want to pry, so they just carried on. So I'm going to pause there for a second, and I'm going to jump ahead one more day. So this is January 1st, 2021, so New Year's Day. And a man named Adam Sipliak contacts San Diego police. Adam is actually one of Jade's ex-boyfriends, and he has a strange story that he just can't get off his mind, and he decided overnight that he needed to contact police and tell them about it. So he says the day before, in the afternoon on December 31st, 2020, Jade called him and begged him to come over because she needed help with something. So Adam came over, and when he got there, she said that her stepdad Tom had overdosed on some sort of drug because he was an addict, and he was so messed up, and she couldn't get him from the car into the house, and she needed help. She needed manpower because he was too heavy. And, men are already heavy as it is. Like Jade wasn't like a bodybuilder. Like Jade's just a normal girl. So no, she can't lift this grown 64-year-old man into the home, but especially when he's like dead weight, like he's basically unconscious and overdosing on drugs right now. So she needed someone to come help her with the body. So that's why she said she contacted Adam originally. But then Adam says when he got there and he was talking to her more and kind of trying to understand what was going on, Jade told him that she actually had killed him and now she needed to get his body inside because it was in her car and she couldn't just leave the body in her car. And once she admitted to this, Adam basically left immediately, got out of there. He didn't want to get involved in this. He didn't want to be incriminated in this. And he just left her. So he kind of sat on this all night, reflecting on it, wondering what to do. And he decided the next day to contact police. So what happened on December 31st in those few hours of Jade pulling in, saying hi to the neighbors, pulling in with Tom asleep or unconscious in the passenger seat, versus a few hours later when she's desperately telling her ex-boyfriend Adam that she's killed him? Well, that's what we're going to get into now. We're going to tell the story through Jade's perspective, according to the testimony that she gave at her trial. And then we're going to pick apart her story a little bit and tell the actual full story. So let's get into it. According to Jade's testimony, Jade initially intended on getting Tom home and getting him settled from rehab, and then she would deal with the photos the next day. So Jade went to pick him up, and according to her, basically the second he got in the car, he started going on about how he needed codeine and he needed a hit of codeine because of the pain. As I mentioned earlier, Tom had a lot of physical issues and medical issues. And she basically was like, I don't have any codeine. I don't know what to do for you. But he did have a prescription for Ambien that the rehab had gave him upon his discharging. I don't know why. Maybe that's just something that rehabs do. You guys could let me know in the comments if you know. But he did apparently have a prescription for Ambien, which you can find. Like, there was photos of this. They found the Ambien. The police found the Ambien. So this was a real story. At least this part was a real story. So Jade said, as she was driving home and Tom's just chilling, she decides she quickly is going to pull into Home Depot just to grab a few things that she's been meaning to get. So she leaves Tom in the car for, like 20 minutes or whatever to go shop around. And apparently she got some odds and ends, which they could either be seen as like super sinister if you're looking at it through like a criminal perspective, or they could be super innocent if you're looking at it through like an interior design perspective. I think she got gloves, a towel, spray paint, and a few other things. So she gets back out to the car, and Jade says through her testimony that she realized the second she got into the car that Tom was messed up on Ambien. He had taken like all the Ambien that was prescribed to him in that moment. So she's like, great, he's high already. We've been out of rehab for like an hour and he's already high. So she apparently drove back to the rehab trying to negotiate with the doctors and stuff to get him back into rehab, but they basically sent him away and sent her away because of the strict COVID-19 protocols. I'm imagining you needed to have like an appointment or do some sort of self-testing or self-isolating or whatever before you get into the rehab. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but this is all according to Jade, by the way, so this could all be false. So then she goes back in the car, and as the minutes tick on, Tom is getting higher and higher and higher. So she drives back to his place, but by this point, she knows she's not going to be able to get him into the house because he's just too high. He's basically unconscious. So she calls this guy, Alan Roach, the fixer, and she says, okay, this is a situation I'm in. I literally don't know what to do. He's too heavy. I can't move him. Can you come over? Sorry, I just realized my water is in the shot. And then Adam says, no, sorry, I can't do it right now. I'm busy, but I'll send over my friend and he can come help you. So I'm sure in this moment, Jade was like, what the hell? Like, I don't want some random guy here. I want you here. But I think her anxiety was so crazy at this point that she would take any help she could get. So a random man named Brian Solomon pops over at this point. He was sent there by Adam, and he takes one look at the situation and sees how messed up Tom is. Like, Tom basically already looked dead by this point, and then he's looking at Jade and he's reading Jade's anxiety and Jade's panic, and he's just getting a weird feeling about this whole situation, and he decides, nah, not today. I'm not doing this today. It's the first day of the new year. It's 2021, baby. Not doing this today. So he bails. So Adam's bailed on her and Brian's bailed on her. So this is when she desperately calls her ex-boyfriend Adam, who I spoke about a little bit earlier, and begs him to come over. So Adam comes over to help, and this is where the story gets a little convoluted. Adam would tell police that he never saw Tom at all during this visit. Tom wasn't in the car. Like, he didn't see Tom in the car. He didn't see Tom in the house. He didn't know where Tom was. He was just listening to the rambling story of Jade and was getting freaked out by the whole thing, had a bad feeling about it, and especially when she admitted to murder, that's when he bailed. Like, he called spade a spade and left. But Jade says in her trial that he did see Tom in the car. He saw Tom's body in the car and saw that he was asleep or unconscious, and that's what freaked him out, and he decided not to help her and leave. So at this point, Jade is well and truly losing it. She's contacted 3 separate men for help, and all 3 have abandoned her, which, like, men be doing that? No, guys, I'm kidding. At this point, you might be wondering why Jade is even going to all this trouble to contact these men instead of just calling 911. And her random excuse for this, which doesn't really track to me, but she says she thought that it would look suspicious and it would look weird and she didn't want to get in trouble, so she decided not to call 911. And so she decides the only thing she can do is just leave Tom in the car. It's getting late, it's getting dark. She brings out some blankets and pillows to the car for Tom and leaves him there to sleep it off overnight, and she just hopes that he will be okay. So I guess the next morning when Jade goes out to check on him, he's dead. He's cold to the touch. It's very clear he's dead, and Jade starts panicking even more. Jade just decides, I need to get rid of this body. So she drives with the body in the car, the dead body in the car. She drives to the hospital, steals a wheelchair, puts it in the trunk, drives back to Tom's house, puts Tom in the wheelchair, but then she still doesn't know what to do. So she decides she needs a minute to figure this out. She needs to figure out a plan. So she puts Tom under a pile of trash. Tom had accumulated like a pile of trash, like boxes, bags. She shoves his body under the trash, covers it up with trash, and then takes off back to her place to figure out a plan. In her head, this was a temporary thing. She would just hide Tom there for a while, figure out what to do. I still don't understand why she wouldn't have just put him in the house and like laid him out so it looked like an overdose in the house. Not that I'm like giving tips and tricks on what to do, but like clearly if his body was wrapped up in a blanket and placed under a mound of trash, that's going to look like a homicide versus if his body's just like laid out on the kitchen floor and she could have like put pills around or something, that would look maybe like an overdose. I just genuinely don't understand what Jade was thinking, but I mean, you probably just don't think straight at all when you're in this situation. You probably can't think rationally because the panic and the adrenaline is just overtaking your body. I do genuinely feel so bad for Jade, and I am like a woman who loves women and like believes women all the time. Like I think Jade is 100% a victim in this, but you can be a victim and a perpetrator at the same time. This was very much out of Jade's character. I think we can all agree on that. Everyone in the case agreed on that. Jade is not like a violent criminal, pathological person. Jade was just a normal girl who was so deeply traumatized by this situation that she acted out of character, but what she did is also not okay. Now is probably the right time to actually go back and go through all of that again, but put in some details that Jade conveniently left out that actually tell the full story. So it's January 1st, 2021, and Adam calls the police to talk about Jade Janks and what he told her and get the police to do something about it. So obviously police need to act. I mean, this is a pretty serious call. So police decide they're going to drive straight to Tom's house, and that's what they do. About an hour after they receive the call, they pull up outside of Tom's house, and they can't find him anywhere. There's no answer at the door. They have no idea where he might be. That is when they see Jade driving. They pull her over, and they ask her a few routine questions. Jade kind of plays dumb and acts like she's concerned about Tom, kind of feigning innocence, and they let her go. They still can't find Tom. They still don't know what's happened to Tom. They still do have Jade on their radar, but it's not like they have enough by any means right now to actually arrest Jade. So they decide to go back to the house and do a proper look through Tom's house to see what is going on. So forensic investigators go over to Tom's house later on that evening, and they work overnight. And they could not find anything in this house, really. It literally looked untouched. So they're about to leave. They're packing up to leave. This is the early morning of January 2nd, and a forensic investigator looks over and notices at the end of the driveway a big pile of trash. So she just goes over to do a routine little look, just kind of take a peek at what's there, and she moves a few things around, just kind of pulling up the layers of the trash, and that's when she sees the body of Tom Merriman wrapped in a blanket beneath the trash pile, the dead body of Tom, obviously. So right in that moment, pretty much, this becomes a missing person investigation to a homicide investigation. Tom was still wearing the bracelet from the rehab center he was in, and he was also apparently wearing the clothes that he was discharged in. So they were able to figure out through those few details that he had probably died on the day of December 31st, 2020, when it was recorded that he had checked out of rehab. They did feel, though, because they had a body now and it was very clear that it was a homicide, and then they also had the tip-off from Adam Sipliak, they did feel like they had enough to arrest Jade at this point. So they found Jade Janks and they arrested her. And I believe they charged her with the murder of Tom Merriman, so first-degree murder, plain and simple. Jade's trial began nearly 2 years later after her arrest, so this was in December of 2022, and by this point, Jade was 39 years old. And throughout the entire trial, Jade maintained her innocence. She did not plead guilty, and she maintained that he simply overdosed on the Ambien. After all, I mean, if you're a juror here, you have to look at the different components. It is true that Tom had a long list of medical issues. He did have a history of substance abuse. There was packets of Ambien in the car, and it was clear in his body that he had taken a lot of Ambien. Not to mention, Jade is what you might call a sympathetic defendant. So she's beautiful, she's successful, she's white, she's privileged. She's made a name for herself in the community. She has a good reputation. These are all things that would make her more of a sympathetic character in the eyes of the jury. And I mean, it goes without saying that another reason she should be sympathetic to the jury is that she was victimized by this man. If you're looking at this case, really, I mean, Jade was a young, successful girl who was victimized by her creepy stepdad who had been preying on her for 15 years. But does that justify murder? Does that make it okay that she murdered him? So this is why the case, no one really knew how this was going to go. A lot of times with these cases, it's like an open and shut trial. You're like, all right, he pleaded not guilty because he has a right to, but there's no way he's going to get away with this. Look at all this evidence. This was not necessarily that. A lot of people really did think Jade was going to be let off. A lot of people thought she wasn't. And really no one knew which way this was going to go because it is such a unique story. And there's so many different components of both people victimizing each other. It was revealed in the trial that Tom's official cause of death was acute zolpidem intoxication. So I guess zolpidem is another word for Ambien, and not strangulation or suffocation. The Ambien package, which was found in the car, as I mentioned earlier, had both Tom and Jade's DNA on the package, which isn't necessarily incriminating in and of itself. I mean, Jade literally could have grabbed it from his hands, took a look at the instructions, and gave it back to him. So as I said, there was zero evidence of a violent strangulation or suffocation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that one did not occur. Because, as you might recall, Tom was pretty much unconscious because he was so high at this point. So she could have easily slipped a bag over his head and held it there without any fight, any struggle, and it wouldn't have left any marks, any bruising, anything like that. It depends on which way you look at it. There's no actual acute evidence that he was strangled, but because he was already unconscious, there wouldn't necessarily need to be evidence. Whereas if someone's wide awake and fighting back and kicking and screaming, and there will 100% be signs of strangulation going on. I guess they did find a bag in Jade's car, and apparently it had both Jade and Tom's DNA on it once again, which is not a good look. It's definitely not good considering what Jade is up against. But again, it's more circumstantial evidence than hard proof that she did this. There's tons of circumstantial evidence against Jade, but at this point in the case, there wasn't a lot of cold, hard facts, but we will get there. So this is the point in the case when things go from being a little bit 50-50 to more 90-10 that Jade was going to get prosecuted for murder. And it is because of a series of text messages that were provided by no one else but Alan Roach. At first, her text messages were honestly pretty innocent. As I said earlier, it was kind of just oh, what's the plan? Let's figure out a plan. But the day of the actual murder, I think she just forgot in that moment that these texts could be easily used in court against her, and she just was frantically texting Alan throughout the day. Jade had told Alan that she was going to pick up Tom that day, and she was hoping he would communicate with her and maybe come over after and be with her while she was with Tom and kind of navigate the situation. I think the two had a plan to confront Tom or threaten Tom and scare him a little bit. She texted him that she was going to the facility, and then she texted him and said, and I quote, "I just dosed the hell out of him." And that was when she was in the car with him. And then Adam didn't reply. Sorry, there's an Adam and an Alan. I'm getting it confused. Alan didn't reply. So she and Alan had previously agreed, as I said, to figure out some sort of scheme together once she had Tom and she had him drugged. But lo and behold, Alan was ghosting her. So this is apparently why she just kind of came up with this spur-of-the-moment plan to go to Home Depot and do a shopping trip, because she needed to kill time. She didn't want to go and be alone with Tom. She needed to hear from Alan to figure out what she should do and what the plan is. So she needed to kill 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And so that's why she went to Home Depot. Her panic is growing more and more. She's continuing to text Alan. He's continuing to ghost. And she started to send texts that were very much incriminating, "I can't carry him back to my car or to his house. I'm not strong enough." And then she said, "Can you come right now?" Eventually, Alan does message back and just says he's busy. I can't, guys. I hate Alan. Technically, I guess he hasn't murdered anyone. I just hate him. Something about Alan, he sucks. He sucks. If you're going to convince this woman to come up with this crazy plan to scare her stepdad or be alone with her stepdad, drug her stepdad, then you can at least reply to her text instead of leaving her to figure this out. I know Jade's the bad one here, but I also hate Alan. And maybe it's just because I've been ghosted so many times from men at the worst possible times. But I do not like Alan Roach. I think he's a scumbag. Anyway, eventually Alan does reply. And as I said, he's like, "I'm busy. I can't come." Okay, you could have told her that earlier before she drugged him. And so he sends his random friend, Brian Solomon, over. And as I said, when Brian gets there, Jade basically fills him in and is like, I need to get him inside. Can you help me get him inside? And Brian kind of realizes how extreme the situation is and bails. So once Brian bails, Jade, of course, starts texting Alan again. And she says, he's waking up and I'm not sure how much longer I can control my temper. I can't keep having a kicking body in my truck. He's very aware and I'm on my own. He's getting more aggressive. So obviously at this point, it's been a few hours and Tom is waking up out of his drugged stupor. And he's probably starting to understand what Jade has done and what's going on. And as she describes it, he's getting aggressive and potentially violent towards her. So it seems at this point, this is when Jade panics, puts a bag over his head, and suffocates him to death. And then she goes, gets the wheelchair, tries to somehow dispose the body under the trash pile. And as she's driving away to try to figure all this out or potentially go to find Alan, that's when she gets pulled over. And in that moment when police are walking from like the police car to her car, you know how you usually have like a minute or two in there? Not that I've ever been pulled over before. But in that time, she sent him a text, Alan. She sent Alan a text that says, lose my number, I'm getting pulled over. And that was the official end of their communication. So yeah, that is the full story with all of the pieces that Jade left out added in. So these text messages were 100% the smoking gun. It's pretty clear that Jade got herself in this crazy situation, panicked, didn't know what to do. Tom is waking up. That's why some people do think this could be considered a case of self-defense. And other people think it wasn't because it was very premeditated. She dosed him. She was making these plans with Alan. So yeah, that's all the evidence. That's like more or less the full story to the extent that I can tell it. And now it was up to the jury to make their decision. When the verdict came down as guilty for first-degree murder, the look on Jade Janks' face was pure shock, surprise, and terror. You clearly could tell just by Jade's reaction that she was not expecting to be found guilty for this. And it honestly really does hurt me to watch. Like, I don't think, I'm going to make this very clear, I don't think Jade should have murdered him. I think Jade could have gone to police. There's so many other things Jade could have done. But the fact that she was like this young, successful woman, like on the cusp of life and doing everything she could to take care of this man and be there for him and going above and beyond, only to be victimized and traumatized by this man. Sorry guys, my camera died, so I'm going to like wrap this up as quickly as I can. But no, I'm not condoning murder. And as I've said, I think Jade could have handled this a lot better, but I also really do feel for Jade. I do not think Tom is a good person, and I do think she got, I believe, sentenced to 25 years to life in federal prison, which honestly I think is too harsh of a sentence for this particular case. She had no violent history. She was not a violent person. I don't think she's a threat to society. This was a very personalized overreaction to being violated by someone that she trusted. Did she take it too far? Yes, but she was also, I think, being manipulated by Alan Roach as well. And there's just like, it just doesn't quite sit right with me for this particular person to be spending 25 years to life in prison. At Jade's sentencing hearing in March of 2023, Jade's biological father, Stephen Janks, testified on her behalf, and he said, I can only imagine what she went through when she found out that Tom, her stepfather, a person she trusted, that she called dad, was a sick, perverted individual. All I can say is this fight is not over, and I truly believe that an injustice has taken place. So yeah, that was in 2023. It's obviously now the end of 2024 and Jade is still in prison. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of appeal in this case or if her sentence was shortened a bit, because a lot of people are not happy about how this case turned out. A lot of people are disgusted at what a harsh punishment she got. But let me know what you guys think. I've said my piece on it. I think it's a really nuanced case. Like I said, there's not exactly a black or white, right or wrong answer to this. So yeah, that's it, guys. That's all I have for you today. Let me know what you think. I'm super curious to hear your thoughts and opinions on this case. If you like this video and you want to see more, then make sure you subscribe and make sure you comment and like, share. All those things really helps boost engagement and helps get my channel out to other people so I can keep growing this little community. I hope you have a great week. I hope you stay safe, stay well, and take care of yourself. I will see you next time.